My name is Elowen Hartley, I'm 29, and if you had asked me a year ago what betrayal looks like, I probably would have given you some vague answer about trust and disappointment. Now I know better. It looks like a room full of people clapping, while someone else takes credit for the thing you built from scratch. And you just stand there, holding a cup of coffee that's gone cold, realizing, too late, that this wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a choice. I didn't interrupt him. That's the part people don't understand when I tell this story now. They always ask why I didn't just walk up, stop him, say something right there. I thought about it. Of course I did. But something in me paused. Because the way Ethan was speaking, the way he carried himself, it wasn't confusion. It wasn't him getting caught up in the moment. He knew exactly what he was doing. And for a second, I think I needed to see how far he'd go. So I stayed where I was, near the back of the room, watching my older brother explain my platform like it had always been his. My parents were sitting in the front row. My mom had this soft smile she always gets when she's proud of him. My dad nodded a couple of times during the presentation. Like everything he was hearing made perfect sense. That part. I think that hurt more than anything else. Because it told me something I'd been trying not to admit for years. They weren't confused either. They just believed him more easily than they ever believed me. Growing up, Ethan was the kind of person people gravitated toward. He didn't have to try. He just knew how to be liked. Teachers, neighbors, relatives. Everyone had a version of him in their head, and it was always a good one. I was the opposite. Not in a dramatic way. I wasn't invisible or anything like that. I just didn't stand out the same way. I worked quietly. I noticed things. I was working at a logistics company, nothing special, just steady work, but the systems we used were outdated in ways that didn't make sense. Manual updates. Delays that could have been avoided. Communication gaps that cost time and money every single day. I started fixing small things first. Little tools. Scripts. Workarounds. Nothing official. Just things that made my job easier. But once I started, I couldn't stop seeing the bigger picture. All the pieces that could connect if someone actually built something properly. So I did. Not all at once. Not perfectly. Late nights. Weekends. A lot of trial and error. There were times I questioned if it was even worth it. Times I stared at my screen thinking, who am I building this for? But I kept going. Because it felt like something that was finally mine. I didn't tell anyone at first. Not my parents. Not friends. And definitely not Ethan. But eventually, I did. I don't know why, exactly. Maybe I wanted someone to understand what I was doing. Maybe I thought he'd be supportive. We were sitting in my apartment that night. He had his feet up on my table like always, scrolling through his phone while I tried to explain the idea. At first he didn't say much. Then he started asking questions. Real questions. How would this scale? Who's the target user? What's the biggest pain point you're solving? I remember feeling relieved. Like, finally, someone was taking it seriously. That's actually big, he said at one point, leaning forward. Like really big if you do it right. I smiled. I think I even laughed a little. Let's see if I can get it to work first, I said. He shook his head slightly. No, él. This isn't just a side project. That should have been the moment I got cautious. But it wasn't. Because it felt like support. Over the next few weeks, he kept bringing it up. Asking for updates. Suggesting ideas. Offering input on things I hadn't even considered yet. At first it helped. Then it shifted. I didn't notice it right away. Looking back, I probably should have. The way he started saying we instead of you. The way he'd explain parts of the system back to me like he had built them himself. It was small. Subtle. Easy to ignore. Until it wasn't. There was a dinner at my parents' house a few weeks later. Nothing special, just one of those routine evenings where everyone sits around the table pretending things are simpler than they are. At some point, my dad asked Ethan about work. And Ethan started talking. About the platform. My platform. Except he didn't say it like that. I've been working on a logistics system, he said, completely natural. Something that could actually scale if it's positioned right. I remember freezing for a second. Not moving. Not reacting. Just waiting. Waiting for him to correct it. To say my name. To say we. He didn't. And no one questioned it. My mom looked impressed. My dad nodded like this made perfect sense coming from him. I opened my mouth to say something. Then I closed it. I told myself it wasn't worth making a scene over one sentence. That I'd talk to him later. That it would get sorted out. I wish I had said something right then. Because that was the moment it stopped being small. A few weeks after that, he called me. He sounded excited. We should present this, he said. Like properly. Investors maybe. I hesitated. I don't think it's ready for that, I said. It is, he replied immediately. You've built something real. You just need the right pitch around it. The way he said you should have reassured me. Instead, something felt slightly off. I ignored it. Because part of me wanted this to work. Wanted us to be on the same side. So I agreed. We started preparing. Or at least, I thought we were. I handled the system. Cleaned things up. Fixed bugs I'd been putting off. Made sure everything actually worked the way it was supposed to. He handled the presentation. Slides. Messaging. Talking points. He was good at that. Better than me. Confident. Clear. Convincing. I even sat with him while he practiced once. Gave feedback. Adjusted things. At one point, he ran through the entire pitch from start to finish. It was smooth. Really smooth. And I remember thinking this might actually happen. That we might actually build something together. That thought didn't last long. The day of the presentation, I arrived early. The room was bigger than I expected. More people too. Not just investors. Some family members had been invited as well. That should have been a warning sign. I stood toward the back while people settled in. My mom waved when she saw me, smiling like she already knew everything was going to go well. Ethan walked up to the front, took a breath, and started speaking. At its core, this platform solves a problem I've been thinking about for years. That's when something in me went very still. I waited. I really did. For him to say my name. To acknowledge me even once. He didn't. Not when he explained the idea. Not when he described the development. Not even when he showed the system working live. It was all his. Every part of it. And I stood there, realizing this wasn't something I could fix with a conversation later. Because he had already decided what the story was going to be. I could feel my pulse in my ears. My hands felt colder than they should have. And still, I didn't interrupt. Because suddenly it all made sense. Every small moment I had ignored. Every time he stepped slightly ahead. Every time no one questioned it. This wasn't new. This was just the first time it was happening in front of everyone. So I didn't say anything. I waited until he finished. Waited through the applause. Then I turned around. And walked out. Quietly. No one stopped me. And I think that's when I understood something I should have learned a long time ago. If you stay silent long enough, people stop expecting you to speak at all. I didn't go back inside. I just kept walking until I reached the parking lot. Like if I slowed down even a little, I'd change my mind and go back in there to explain something that shouldn't need explaining. I sat in my car for a while without starting it. Hands on the steering wheel, eyes unfocused. I remember noticing small things for no reason. The faint crack in the dashboard. The way the streetlight flickered even though it wasn't dark yet. My phone started ringing. Ethan. I let it ring. Then it stopped. Started again. By the third time I answered. Where did you go? He asked, like I had stepped out for air instead of leaving the entire situation behind. I left. You couldn't stay for 5 minutes? His tone had that edge. Mild irritation, like I'd inconvenienced him. We're wrapping up. I almost laughed at that. Not because it was funny. Just the way he said it. You forgot something, I said. What? Me. There was a pause. Not long, but long enough. Don't start this right now, he said. It's just a presentation. We'll sort it out later. Later. That word again. I leaned my head back against the seat. Closed my eyes for a second. Right, I said. Later. I ended the call before he could keep going. That night felt strange. Not dramatic. Not heavy in the way I expected. Just quiet. Too quiet. I thought I'd be angry. Or upset. Or something obvious. But mostly I just felt clear. Like something that had been slightly out of focus for years had finally snapped into place. I opened my laptop. Not to fix anything. Just to look. The system was still there. Exactly as I had built it. Every version, every update, every late-night fix. All of it sitting where I left it. Untouched. Unclaimed. Except, not entirely. About 6 months into building it, I had a conversation with someone from my old job. Maya. We weren't close, but she was the kind of person who didn't miss details. The kind who asked questions that made you pause. I had mentioned the platform casually back then. Nothing dramatic. Just something I was working on. She didn't react the way most people did. She didn't smile and say that's cool or move on. She asked, have you protected it? I remember shrugging it off. It's just a prototype, I said. She didn't smile. Elowen, she said very matter of fact. Ideas don't get stolen. Execution does. I didn't fully get what she meant at the time, but it stuck with me. Later that night, I started documenting everything. Every build. Every change. Every update. Not obsessively. Just consistently. And eventually, I went a step further. Quietly. No announcements. I filed ownership under my name. At the time, it felt unnecessary. Almost paranoid. I nearly told Ethan about it once. I didn't. Looking back, that might have been the one instinct I actually trusted. The next few days were telling. Ethan didn't call. Didn't text. Nothing. And that silence said more than anything else could have. If he thought he'd done something wrong, he would have reached out immediately. Tried to smooth it over. Explain. Reframe. He didn't. Then my mom called. You left early, she said, like that was the main issue. I did. You should have stayed. Ethan did really well. Of course he did. I heard. He's building something important, she continued. You should be proud of him. I didn't say anything for a second. I don't know why, but some part of me expected her to pause and add something else. Something small, even. She didn't. I'll talk to you later, I said, and ended the call before it turned into something I didn't want to have. A week passed. Then, let him deal with whatever came next. But another part of me needed to see it through. Needed to know how far this would go. I called Maya that evening. We hadn't spoken in months, but she picked up like no time had passed. I was wondering when you'd call, she said. That caught me off guard. You were. You don't sound like someone who lets things go easily, she replied. So what happened? I told her. Not every detail. Just enough. She didn't interrupt. Didn't react right away. When I finished, there was a short pause. Okay, she said finally. Then we don't react emotionally. I leaned back in my chair. That's it. That's it, she said. You already did the important part. Which is? You documented everything, right? Yes. And ownership? Yes. Then you don't need to argue, she said. You let him present. I frowned slightly. And then, she said, you let him commit to the story publicly. It took me a second to understand what she meant. And when I did, something in me settled. This wasn't about confronting him mid-sentence or creating a scene. It was about timing. Letting him build something that couldn't hold up once it was examined closely. The day of the second presentation felt different. More formal. More focused. The room wasn't filled with familiar faces this time. Fewer family members. More people who actually cared about details. I got there early again. This time, I didn't stand all the way at the back. Just off to the side. Close enough to hear everything clearly. Ethan walked in about 10 minutes later. Same confidence. Same easy smile. When he saw me, he nodded slightly. Glad you came, he said. Wouldn't miss it, I replied. And I meant it. Just not for the reason he thought. He started speaking. And I'll give him this, he was good. Clear. Structured. Confident. He had refined everything. Made it sound even better than before. And still. Not a single mention of me. I watched the people in the room this time. Not him. Their expressions. Their reactions. They were paying attention. Asking the right kinds of questions in between sections. This wasn't the kind of room you could bluff your way through forever. At some point, a thought crossed my mind. What if this actually works for him? What if no one questions it? What if he walks out of this with everything? It sat there for a moment. Heavy. Uncomfortable. But I didn't move. Because I knew something he didn't. When he finished, the room shifted. No applause this time. Just focus. One of the investors leaned forward slightly. Can you walk us through the development timeline? He asked. Simple question. Reasonable. Ethan nodded without hesitation. Of course. And he started explaining. Confident. Detailed. Convincing. Until he said one thing wrong. Just one. A date. It was small. Easy to miss. But someone didn't miss it. And that's when everything started to change. Ethan didn't notice the mistake. Why would he? To anyone else, it sounded right. Smooth. Confident. The kind of answer people expect when someone knows what they're talking about. But the man who asked the question didn't lean back. He stayed exactly where he was, eyes on Ethan, like he was turning that one detail over in his mind. You said development started in March last year? He asked. Ethan nodded. No hesitation. Correct. A small pause followed. Not awkward, just deliberate. Then the man glanced to his right. I followed his line of sight. Maya. She was sitting 2 seats down, calm as ever, hands folded loosely in her lap like she was just another observer. If you didn't know her, you'd miss it. But I knew that stillness. It meant she'd already caught something. I'm sorry, she said, her voice even almost casual. Could you clarify something? Ethan smiled. That same practiced, easy confidence. Of course. You're saying you initiated development in March? Yes. And before that, there wasn't a working prototype? He shook his head lightly. Not a functional one, no. Maya tilted her head just a fraction. It was subtle, but it changed the tone. Interesting, she said. Not confrontational. Not sharp. Just enough to make people pay attention. One of the other investors leaned forward. Why is that interesting? She didn't rush her answer. I've seen a version of a very similar system, she said, and it would suggest development started quite a bit earlier. The room didn't react loudly, but something shifted. You could feel it. Ethan let out a small breath, like he was about to smooth it over. Well, early concepts always evolve, he said. What you may have seen. It had the same architecture, Maya added, still calm. Same structure. Same logic. Now people were really listening. Not just hearing him, listening. The first investor spoke again, a little more direct this time. Do you have documentation for your development timeline? Ethan nodded immediately. Yes, of course. And I could see it in his face, he believed that. Because in his version of things he had already stepped into ownership. He'd repeated it enough times that it probably felt true. That's when I moved. I hadn't planned to. The original idea was to stay out of it completely, let Maya guide things, let the questions do their job. But something about the way he said of course, like there was nothing to question, pulled me forward. I didn't step into the center of the room, just close enough to be seen. Those documents already exist, I said. My voice sounded steady, more than I expected. Every head turned, including Ethan's. For a second he just looked at me, like he hadn't processed what was happening yet. He said. I ignored the name. I kept everything. I continued. Every version. Every update. Every timestamp. I could feel my heartbeat now. Not racing, just present, steady, like it was keeping time with what I was saying. The first working prototype was completed 8 months before March. Silence. Real silence this time. Ethan let out a short laugh. It didn't land. Okay, he said, glancing around the room. I think there's been some confusion. There hasn't, Maya said quietly. That was it. No force. No argument. Just a line drawn cleanly across the situation. One of the investors looked at me. Can you show us? I nodded. My hands felt colder than usual as I opened my laptop, but they didn't shake. I pulled up the system. Not the polished version Ethan had presented. The real one. The build history. The logs. The timestamps. All of it. I turned the screen toward them and stepped back. No explanation. No commentary. Just the truth sitting there. They didn't rush. They leaned in one by one, scanning through it. Scrolling. Pausing. Checking dates. The room felt different now. Quieter, but heavier. Ethan tried to step in again. There were multiple contributors. He started. There's one registered owner, Maya said. Same tone. Same calm delivery. And that ended that line of defense before it could even form. One of the investors looked up at me. Your name is the only one listed here. Yes, I said. Ethan went still. Not dramatically. Not in a way most people would notice. But I saw it. That slight hesitation when he realized there wasn't a clean way out of this. You said you built this, I said, looking at him now. Not accusing. Not loud. Just stating what had already been said. He opened his mouth. Closed it. Tried again. This was a collaborative. But the sentence didn't land. Because it didn't fit anymore. Not with what was in front of everyone. The room didn't need a dramatic reaction. It didn't need raised voices. It just decided. Quietly. You could see it in the way people leaned back instead of forward. In the way notebooks stopped moving. In the small glances exchanged between them. One of the investors finally spoke again. Why wasn't she mentioned in your presentation? That question didn't have a workaround. Not a good one. Ethan didn't answer right away. And in that pause, everything settled into place. Because silence in that moment said more than anything he could have come up with. I didn't feel triumphant. I thought I might. But I didn't. Just steady. Like something that had been off balance for a long time had finally corrected itself. Maya spoke again then, almost like she was closing a file. She filed ownership and usage rights prior to any external presentation, she said. That added a layer most people in that room understood immediately. No need to explain it further. One of the investors straightened slightly. Meaning public representation without acknowledgement becomes an issue, Maya replied. Not threatening. Just factual. Ethan let out a breath and tried one last time. Let's not overcomplicate this, he said, holding his hands out slightly. We're talking about a family collaboration here. Family. That word again. He looked at me. If this is about credit, we can fix that. It's not about credit, I said. My voice didn't rise. It's about ownership. That landed differently. Because it wasn't emotional. It wasn't negotiable. One of the investors asked, "Was there any agreement between you?" "No," I said. Simple. Final. That was the point where it ended. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just ended. One of them closed his notebook. "Thank you," he said. Not to Ethan. To the room. Another stood up. Then another. No one rushed. No one argued. They just disengaged. Completely. Ethan turned to me once most of them had started gathering their things. "You didn't have to do that here," he said, quieter now. I looked at him for a moment. Really looked. "I didn't," I said. "You did." He shook his head slightly. "We could have handled this privately." "There's nothing to handle," I replied. And I meant it. Because whatever this was, it had already been decided the moment he stood up there, and chose not to say my name. He stepped a little closer, lowering his voice. "You're making this bigger than it is." I almost smiled at that. Because he still didn't see it. "I didn't make it anything," I said. "I just stopped ignoring it." That seemed to land. Not fully, but enough to quiet him. Maya stepped beside me then, not saying much. Just present. "If there's nothing else," she said calmly, "we'll be leaving. No confrontation. No final push. Just done." I closed my laptop, picked up my bag, and walked toward the door. This time, I didn't feel the need to look back right away. But just before I stepped out, I did. Ethan was still standing there, in the middle of a room that had emptied around him, and for the first time in my life, he didn't look like the person everyone would automatically believe. I thought that would be the hardest part, standing in that room, saying it out loud, letting it land in front of people who actually understood what it meant. It wasn't. The hard part started later, when it turned into something my family had to respond to. I didn't even make it halfway home before my phone lit up. My mom. I let it ring once, twice. I knew exactly what the conversation was going to sound like, even before I picked up. Still I answered. "What happened?" "No hello. No pause. Just that." "I left," I said. "I know you left," she replied quickly. "Ethan said the meeting fell apart because of you." Of course he did. I pulled the car over without really thinking about it. Just needed a second to not be moving while this started. "I didn't make anything fall apart," I said. "He said you interrupted him. In front of investors," she continued, her voice tightening. "Do you understand how that looks?" I stared out through the windshield for a moment. Not because I didn't have an answer. Because I knew it wouldn't matter. "I told the truth," I said. There was a pause. "What truth?" she asked. The way she said it, it wasn't curiosity. It felt more like she was waiting for me to say something that fit what she already believed. That it was my work. Silence again. Then she exhaled, slow, like she was trying to stay patient. "Elowen, why would you say that there?" That question sat in the air for a second. Not is it true? Not what happened. Just why would I say it? I felt something shift in me again. That same quiet clarity from before, but sharper this time. "I said it because it's true," I replied. "You could have talked to him privately," she said, a little more firmly now. "You didn't have to embarrass him." Embarrass him. I thought about the room. How calm it had been. How controlled everything was. And somehow, it was still me who caused a problem. "I didn't raise my voice," I said. "That's not the point," she snapped. "You undermined your own brother." There it was. Not he took something from you. Just you hurt him. I let out a small breath. "Did he tell you it was my system?" I asked. Another pause. "He said you worked on parts of it," she replied. Parts. That word almost made me laugh. Not because it was funny. Just because it was so far from reality it felt unreal. "I built it," I said slower now. "You're exaggerating," she said immediately. "Ethan wouldn't lie about something like that." Wouldn't. I didn't argue. Not because I agreed. Because I understood something in that moment I should have accepted a long time ago. This wasn't about facts. It was about who they believed. "I'm not going to argue about this," I said. "I just don't understand why you would do something like this," she replied, softer now, but still holding that same line. I almost explained. Almost tried one more time. But I stopped. Because I had already said everything that mattered. "I'll talk to you later," I said. And I ended the call. By the time I got home, the messages had started. My dad first. Short. Direct. "Call your mother." Then another. "This needs to be fixed." Fixed. Like it was a misunderstanding. Like all I had to do was say the right thing. and everything would go back to normal. Then Ethan. Longer message. I don't know what you think you proved today, but you made this way bigger than it needed to be. I read that one a few times. Not because it surprised me. Because it didn't. It sounded exactly like him. Then more messages. An aunt. A cousin. Different words, same tone. Family should handle things privately. You've hurt him. This could have been avoided. I sat on my couch with my phone in my hand, reading all of it. And for a second, just a second, that old instinct showed up again. The one that says maybe I should just smooth this over. Say something vague. Let it settle. Keep the peace. I hate that instinct. Because it always sounds reasonable in the moment. It always feels easier. And it always costs me something. I put my phone down and walked over to my desk. Opened my laptop again. The system was still there. Every version. Every timestamp. Unchanged. Unquestionable. I stared at it for a while. And it hit me really clearly this time. I wasn't confused. They were choosing to be. My phone rang again. Ethan. I let it ring once. Then I answered. What are you doing? He asked immediately. Nothing, I said. That's the problem, he snapped. You should be fixing this. Fixing. Always fixing. How? I asked. A pause. Then. Tell them it was a misunderstanding, he said. That we worked on it together. There it was. Simple. Clean. Completely wrong. I'm not going to say that, I replied. Silence. Then a sharp breath. You're being stubborn, he said. Maybe, I said. Serios. This is going to affect everything. I know. Another pause. Longer this time. You're overreacting, he said finally. I thought about that for a second. Then I said something I hadn't said to him before. Not like this. No, I said. I just stopped ignoring it. That landed. I could tell. Because he didn't respond right away. You're going to regret this, he said eventually. Maybe. But I already knew what regret felt like. I already do, I replied. And I ended the call. I thought that might slow things down. That drawing a line would make them step back. It didn't. Because the next morning, things shifted in a way none of them could control. And this time, it wasn't just about family anymore. The next morning didn't feel dramatic. No heavy silence. No sense that something huge had just happened. Just the usual things, the sound of traffic outside, a notification from some random app, the coffee machine taking a little longer than it should. For a few minutes, it almost felt like everything had settled. Then I opened my email. There weren't many messages. Just a few new ones sitting at the top. The first one was short. Clean. Professional. Elowen. I'd like to continue our conversation about the platform you presented. Let me know when you're available. I read it twice. Not because it was complicated. Because of what it didn't say. There was no mention of Ethan. No you and your team. Just me. I set my coffee down without taking a sip. Opened the next one. This one was longer. More detailed. Questions about scalability, deployment timelines, integration, real questions. The kind people only ask when they're actually interested, not just being polite. I felt something shift in my chest. Not excitement exactly. More like recognition. Like someone had finally looked at the work itself instead of the person presenting it. The third email was different. Short again. But final. After reviewing yesterday's presentation, we've decided not to move forward with the proposal as presented. No explicación. None needed. I leaned back in my chair and stared at the screen for a while. That's when it really landed. This wasn't contained anymore. It had moved beyond family, beyond that room. Into something that couldn't be reshaped by a conversation or explained away over dinner. Reputation. Credibility. The kind of things that follow you quietly. Ethan didn't call that morning. Or text. Which told me everything I needed to know. Because if things had gone his way, even slightly, he would have said something. Silence meant he didn't have anything to say. Or nothing that would work. The call came later that afternoon. Unknown number. I almost ignored it. But something about the timing made me pick up. Hello. Hi, is this Elowen Hartley? Yes. This is Daniel Reeves. We met briefly yesterday. It took me a second to place him. One of the investors. Not the one asking most of the questions. The one who watched more than he spoke. I wanted to follow up, if you have a few minutes, he said. Ido. There was a small pause, like he was choosing his words. What happened yesterday was unfortunate, he said. But it clarified a few things. I didn't respond right away. I wanted to hear what he meant. We invest in people as much as ideas, he continued. And clarity matters. That word again. Clarity. I understand, I said. I'd like to hear your version, he added. Not your side. Your version. There's a difference. I didn't try to make it sound dramatic. Didn't exaggerate anything. I just explained what I built, when I built it, how it became what it was. There were a few questions, specific ones. Nothing aggressive, just careful. When I finished, there was a short pause. Then, that aligns with what we observed, he said. Something about that settled deeper than I expected. Not validation in a loud way, just confirmation. We're no longer interested in moving forward with Ethan, he continued. Direct. No hesitación. But we are interested in continuing this conversation with you. I didn't react right away. I think part of me had expected something like this. But hearing it out loud still felt different. I'd like to review your structure, he said. Ownership, roadmap, next steps. Of course, I replied. We can set up a proper meeting. No rush, but sooner is better. I understand. We wrapped up the call a minute later. Nothing dramatic. No big promises. Just an opening. I sat there for a while after it ended. Phone still in my hand. Looking at nothing in particular. I should have felt excited. And maybe a small part of me did. But mostly I felt steady. Like something that had been tilted for a long time had finally leveled out. The messages started again not long after. But this time they felt different. Not because the words changed. Because I did. My mom called again. I let it ring. My dad texted. We need to talk. Ethan sent another message. You're making this worse. I read it. Didn't reply. Not immediately. Not this time. Because for the first time, I wasn't trying to fix how this looked. I wasn't trying to manage anyone else's reaction. I was just sitting with the reality of it. Later that evening, I finally responded. Not a long message. Not emotional. Just simple. I'm not changing what I said. I stared at it for a second before sending it. Not because I was unsure. Because I knew exactly what it meant. Once I sent it, there wasn't really a version of this where things went back to how they were. The reply came almost instantly. From Ethan. So that's it. You're just going to burn everything down over this? I read it once. Then again. And I realized something I hadn't fully put into words before. I wasn't the one who burned anything down. He had just assumed I would keep standing in the background while it happened. I didn't reply. Not right away. Because I knew the next thing I said mattered. And I wasn't interested in saying anything I'd have to take back later. I set my phone down, leaned back in my chair, and closed my eyes for a second. And somewhere in that quiet moment, I made a decision. Not about the platform. Not about the investors. About something else. Something that had been building for a long time. Because if they were going to keep pushing this, if they were going to keep trying to rewrite what happened, then the next conversation we had wasn't going to be like the ones before. And the next time I saw my family, it wasn't over the phone. It was face to face. And that's where things finally stopped being subtle. It wasn't planned. That's the strange part. No one said, let's meet and talk this out. No calm agreement, no neutral ground. My mom just texted me that morning. Come over tonight. We need to sit down as a family. Not a question. I stared at it for a while, phone in my hand, thumb hovering like I might type something back. I almost said no. Actually, I should have said no. But something in me wanted to end the back and forth. The calls, the messages, the way everything kept circling the same point without anyone actually saying it out loud. So I replied. Okay. The drive there felt longer than usual. Same roads. Same turns. Nothing different. But everything felt sharper. Like I was noticing things I normally wouldn't. The way people walked past each other without looking. The sound of a car door slamming somewhere in the distance. Small things. The kind your brain picks up when it's trying not to think about something bigger. By the time I pulled into the driveway, my chest felt tight in a way I couldn't quite name. Not fear. Just anticipation. When I walked in, everyone was already there. My dad was sitting in his usual spot. Arms crossed. Posture straight like he was already bracing for something. My mom stood near the kitchen, not moving much, just watching the door like she'd been waiting for the exact second I stepped in. And Ethan. He was leaning against the wall, phone in his hand, scrolling like none of this really mattered. That irritated me more than anything else. Not the situation. That. Finally, my dad said. Not loud, but firm. I closed the door behind me and set my bag down near the chair. No one offered me a seat. So I stayed standing. We need to clear this up, my mom started, her voice softer than his but just as controlled. I nodded once. Okay. She looked relieved for a second, like that one word meant I was about to agree with whatever came next. It didn't. What happened at that meeting, my dad said, leaning forward slightly, was unnecessary. There it was. Straight to it. Not what happened. Not why. Just that it shouldn't have happened. I told the truth, I said. My voice sounded steady. I focused on that. That's not the point, he replied immediately. You don't handle things like that in public. I glanced at Ethan for a second. He didn't look up. Still scrolling. So how should it have been handled? I asked. No sarcasm. Just a real question. My mom stepped in before my dad could answer. Privately, she said. As a family. There it was again. Family. The same word that kept getting used like it explained everything. He presented my work publicly, I said. Without mentioning me. Ethan let out a quiet breath through his nose, like he was already tired of this. We've been over this, he said without looking up. You're acting like I stole something. That made me pause. Not because it surprised me, because of how easily he said it. You did, I replied. That got his attention. He looked up then, finally, and for the first time since I walked in, the room actually felt focused. No, he said, pushing himself off the wall. I built on what you started. Built on. That phrasing again. Like everything I had done was just a beginning. And you couldn't mention that? I asked. It wasn't relevant to the pitch, he said. I almost laughed. Not out loud. Just the way he said it. So certain. Not relevant, I repeated quietly. It's about positioning, he continued, like he was explaining something simple. Investors care about leadership, not who wrote every line of code. My dad nodded slightly at that. Of course he did. So you decided that meant removing me completely, I said. I decided to present it in a way that works, he replied. There it was. Clear. No confusión. No misunderstanding. A decision. My mom stepped closer. Elowen, listen, this doesn't have to turn into something bigger. You both worked on it in different ways. I looked at her. Really looked. Did I? I asked. She hesitated. Just for a second. But it was enough. You know what I mean, she said. I did. She meant make this easier. Make it smoother. Make it something that didn't disrupt the version they were comfortable with. No, I said quietly. I don't. The room went still. Not dramatically. Just quieter. My dad leaned back, exhaling through his nose. This is exactly what we're talking about, he said. You're escalating something that could have been resolved. Resolved. I thought about that. About what resolved would actually look like to them. Me stepping back. Letting it go. Agreeing to something that wasn't true just so everything felt normal again. I'm not escalating anything, I said. I'm just not correcting the truth to make it easier. That landed harder than I expected. My mom looked at me like she didn't recognize what I had just said. Ethan shook his head slightly. You're going to ruin this, he said. There wasn't anger in his voice. That's what made it worse. It sounded like a statement. I didn't ruin anything, I replied. You did, he said. We had investors ready to move forward. With what? I asked. Your version? He didn't answer that. Silence stretched for a moment. Then my dad spoke again, slower this time. What do you want? That question hung in the air. Not emotional. Not loud. Just direct. I thought about it. Not for long. Because the answer had been there for a while. I want what's mine to stay mine, I said. No extra words. No explanation. Just that. My mom's expression shifted. Not fully, but enough. That's all, she asked. I nodded. That's all. Ethan let out a short breath. So you're just going to walk away from this, he asked. I looked at him. And for a second, I saw something I hadn't expected. Not anger. Not even frustration. Uncertainty. Just a flicker. I already did, I said. No one spoke after that. Not immediately. Because I think, for the first time, they realized I wasn't negotiating. I wasn't trying to fix it. I wasn't waiting for them to understand. I picked up my bag. Walked to the door. No one stopped me. Not this time either. As I reached for the handle, my mom said my name. Soft. Careful. Elowen. I paused. Just for a second. Didn't turn around. We're your family, she said. I stood there, hand on the door. And I don't know why, but that sentence felt heavier than anything else she had said. Not because it was wrong. Because of what it expected. I know, I said. And then I opened the door. And walked out. The air outside felt colder than it should have. Or maybe I just noticed it more. I didn't rush to my car this time. Didn't check my phone. Didn't look back. And somewhere between the front door and the end of the driveway, something settled. Not perfectly. Not completely. But enough. Because for the first time, I wasn't trying to be understood. I was just done explaining. I didn't check my phone when I got back that night. That was new. Usually after something like that, I'd replay everything. Every word, every pause, every expression. I'd look for things I could have said differently, ways I could have made it land better. I didn't do that this time. I just set my bag down, took off my shoes, and sat on the edge of my bed for a while, staring at nothing in particular. It wasn't relief. Not exactly. More like quiet. The kind that comes after something finally stops. The next morning, I woke up earlier than usual. No alarm. Just awake. For a second, I forgot everything. That small, peaceful second before your brain catches up. Then it did. And instead of that usual heaviness, there was something else. Space. I made coffee, opened my laptop, and pulled up the files again. Same system. Same history. Nothing had changed. Except now, it felt different looking at it. Not like something I had to defend. Just something I had built. I replied to the emails. Kept it simple. Professional. No extra emotion. Availability. Documentation. A short overview of where things stood. No mention of Ethan. Not because I was hiding it. Because it wasn't relevant anymore. The meeting got scheduled for 2 days later. Small group. Focused. No big room this time. No audience. Just people who asked questions that mattered. When I walked in, it felt completely different from before. No tensión. No performance. Just conversation. They asked about structure. Ownership. Scalability. What I wanted to do next. Not what I had already done. What I was going to do. That part stayed with me. At one point, Daniel leaned back slightly and said, "Where do you see this in a year?" I paused. Not because I didn't have an answer. Because for the first time, I realized I could answer that without adjusting it for anyone else. Stable, I said. Functional. Something people rely on, not just try out. He nodded. No overreacción. Just noted. We talked for about an hour. Maybe a little more. By the end of it, nothing dramatic happened. No handshake deals. No big announcements. Just a clear next step. They wanted to move forward. With me. When I stepped out of that building, I didn't rush. Didn't call anyone. Didn't even check my phone right away. I just stood there for a moment, letting it settle. Because it wasn't loud. It wasn't overwhelming. It was steady. Things didn't change overnight after that. There was work. A lot of it. Setting things up properly. Structuring everything the way it should have been from the beginning. Long hours again. But this time it felt different. Not like I was trying to prove something. Just building. My family still reached out. Not as often. But enough. Messages here and there. My mom sent one a few days later. "I hope you're okay." I read it. Didn't reply right away. Not because I didn't care. Because I didn't know what okay meant in that context anymore. Ethan didn't message again. At least, not directly. I heard things through other people. Bits and pieces. He was trying to rework the idea. Frame it differently. Move forward somehow. Maybe he would. Maybe he wouldn't. I stopped trying to follow it. Weeks passed. Then months. The platform grew. Slowly at first. Then more steadily. Clients came in. Not all at once. But enough. Each one felt real. Not because of validation. Because they were choosing it for what it did. Not who was presenting it. One evening, I was sitting at my desk, looking over something small. Just a minor update. Nothing important. And I realized I hadn't thought about that room in a while. Not the presentation. Not the fallout. Not even the conversation at my parents' house. It had faded. Not disappeared. Just lost its weight. I leaned back in my chair and let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. And I thought about that moment again. Standing at the back of the room, watching him speak. That feeling of being overlooked. Dismissed. Invisible. It felt far away now. Not because it didn't matter. Because it didn't define anything anymore. I closed my laptop and stood up, stretching a little. The room was quiet. The same kind of quiet as that night after everything happened. But this time it felt different. Not empty. Full. I didn't win anything. Not really. There wasn't a moment where everything turned in my favor all at once. No dramatic ending. Just a series of small decisions. One after another. Until I stopped stepping back. And maybe that's the part that matters most. Not what he did. Not what they believed. But the moment I decided not to adjust myself to fit it anymore. Sometimes I still think about calling my mom. Not to explain anything. Just to talk. I haven't yet. Maybe I will. Maybe I won't. But I know this much now. Walking away quietly doesn't mean you lost. Sometimes it just means You finally stopped giving your place to someone else.